So as I mentioned before, today we are going to work on the next topic of our preparation to GCSE exam. It's going to be Introduction to Python. Today we are going to cover some basics. We are going to talk about the next things: objects and variables, numbers, what data types represent numbers, what are strings, text values representing true or false, how we can input data from keyboard, and also I'll show you some extra tricks how to work with Python. So in this course, we are going to use Google Colab or another alternative, which is Python notebooks for any kind of software or IDE what you are using. It can be Visual Code, it can be Charm, it can be Replit. I know that Replit is currently very limited. You can use online GitHub, Visual Studio, etc., etc. The first thing that we are going to figure out how the data is stored, the data that we define in our program. So let's say we have two variables, some variable and text data. So we know how the memory works, we know how it's designed, etc. So this is example of two memory cells, actually even more, how we can store some data. So in some address, we write down the value that we want to store. Let it be 100, and it would be stored in the first cell of memory. Also, we can define another variable, which is text data, and it will store some text. And as you can see, because of text is longer than just 100, which takes what? Just 1 and 2 zeros, we would need way more space in our memory. So this is kind of simplification of how we can store the values. So we can say when we create a variable in Python, it means we reserve some value in our memory for some specific data, and then we can, these variables stored in Python, they can pull the data from the memory. Now, let's have a look at some special function called ID. It is the function that returns the identity of our object. It just refers to some. You don't have to write down print function. You can just write down the value that you want to show as an output. And let's apply this ID function to our text data as well. And we can see that it shows a different identity for the data. So what does it mean for us? It means that we are storing it in different memory cells. So today we are going to cover the next concepts such as variable assignment, mutable, immutable objects, variable reassignment, identity, dynamic type. So first of all, we need to understand that Python is a dynamic programming language. We are going to cover this definition just in a tiny bit when we go to dynamic type. And there is another thing very important in Python as programming language, that it can have mutable and immutable objects. First of all, we need to understand that every single variable, every single function, every single class, module, package, etc. that you define in Python is an object. So as I mentioned, there are mutable and immutable objects. So what is the difference between mutable and immutable objects? Mutable objects are the objects that you can change. Immutable objects are the objects that you cannot change. Immutable objects, we can say it could be list, dictionary, set. For immutable objects, these are basic data types that we are going to cover today. So let's try to assign three different values. X equal to 5, Y is equal to 3.14, and Z equal to hello world. Again, there is a function called type, which allows us to check data type of some specific variable. Let's have a look. Let's run it. It shows integer. It shows str. So text values in Python, they're assigned to data type str or string. Those values with floating point is float, and whole numbers are integer. Let's have a look at the output, how it would change if I would have print here. It would show class integer. We are going to talk about classes later, but what can we say from this output, class int? When we see that it says class int, and as I mentioned before, everything in Python is an object, we can say that it's instance of object integer, of object type integer. The same way we can say about float. And next thing, let's try to assign two variables, A and B, to the value of 5. We run the code, everything works as expected. Now let's check that these both variables store the integer objects. A is integer and B is. And now interesting question for you. What would be ID of these two objects? It's going to be different one. Give you 5 seconds to think. Let's check now identity of object B, and we can see 384. So what does it mean? It means that both variable A and variable b, they have a link reference to the same object stored in memory. We are talking about other languages such as C or C++. They reserve place in memory for their variable. Python works a bit different. It reserves some variable and it stores it, some value for variable and it stores there. In case if it's repeated, it's going to be the same value. Now, let me show you another way how we can define variables. Let's say we can define variables in one line. In this way, we would assign value A and variable A, variable B to the value of. Now let's check identities of these two variables. As we can see, it is ending 288, 320. Okay. Now, using the same approach, we can swap the value stored in A, which would become B now, and value stored in B, which would become. Now, let's check their identity. And as we can see, in both cases, in line number 3, we are printing the value of identity of object A. In the beginning, it was ending 288. Now it's ending 320. So what does it mean? That values of our objects changed. And let's have a look. Let's try to print out value of A became 3. Let me remind you, it was 2. And value of B became 2. So it means that swap of the values was successful. Now, next thing that we are going to talk about today is going to be numbers. We are going to use for numbers, which are going to be what? Integers. We know that there are quite a few actions that we can apply to numbers. From math, we know about addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, float division, and there is floor division. We are going to cover the difference between them just in a tiny bit. I'm sure that you already know it, but we are still going to talk about this. Modulo, which is remainder in other words, exponentiation. Let's have a look at a few basic arithmetic operations with integers. So as you can see, we can write down the expression right directly inside of our function print. So there is going to be what? This is going to be in output of variables a plus, as we can see, 5 plus 2 is equal to, which is pretty much correct. I would like to pay attention to the exponentiation. In math, you might be used to having exponentiation written down such as 5 to the power of 2. And you can see that it would return you 7. So we can see it's definitely not going to be 7. Yeah, because it's what does this sign do in Python? It is line operation XOR, which we know we are moving our value by what? By 1 bit. Yeah. So in case if we have 3 by 2, we are going to have what? So we are going to cover this operation in one lesson when we are going to talk about tables. Now let's talk about float pointing. We have again float pointing numbers, are the numbers with floating number that have decimal points, such as 2.5, 0.5. Another interesting question. In terms of math, we know that in case if we write down 2.5 plus 0.5, it's going to be equal just to 3. That's how we would write it down in math, right? But let's see how it would be written in Python. So we create a variable c equal to 2.5, variable d which is equal to 0.5. And let's try to run this code and to see the out. So as we can see, the output for c plus d, which is 2.5 and 0.5, would be 3.0. Perfect. Now let's have a look at the more interesting example. So the rule says if we add integer value and float value in Python, it's going to be automatically converted to float value. So here we have example of 5 and 2.5. As I can see, the output should be equal to what? Should be equal to 7.5. Let's see. Yeah, it is 7.5, which is what? Which is float value. Now, let's see how we can convert values from one data type to another. Let's say we have some value equal to 10. And we want, let's say it would be float over. Let's print the type of a variable before converting, and let's print it of converted value. Let's also print the value a converted. Let's have a look what the code is going to give us in the out. So we can see in the beginning a is equal to 10, which is whole number, which represents what data type integer. And after, make it a bit more beautiful. We can see it is 10.0, so it already has decimal value. And now it represents data type float. So again, in case if you want to convert it to another data type, you just need to use function. So it's basically, I'm using function float. It means I selected data type float that I want to convert my value. Obviously, not every single data type you can convert to float, but there are some basic types that you can convert. We are going to have a look at this just in a tiny bit. So now let's try to convert it back then to integer. Let's print it and let's have a look if for success. So we can see from 10.0 it became 10 and got converted to integer data. Now let's make one more experiment. Let's increase our a converted by, let's say, 10.0 plus print our new value of a converted, and let's see. So we can see we've got 10.05, but when we converted it to data type integer, it is still 10. Now let's try to increase the value by 0.5, and math rules of rounding up tells us that it must be 11. So let's see if it's going to be 11. It's still staying 10. Maybe it's not 0.5, maybe it's 6. 0.6. Let's try 0. No, not working. Let's try now 0.99, and it is still 10. Why does it keep only 10? Why it does not round it up? Because again, the main thing of int, let's see if there is description, yeah, converts number of string to integer, and let's see, yeah, it does not really say what it converts it to, but point is we can say that it just gets rid of any decimal part and just keeps the whole integer part. So it keeps just numerical part before decimal. So no matter how many nines you're going to put here, it's still going to stay just 10. Any questions? Let's move on. There are some different mathematical functions that you can use. They are built in some modules, etc. We are going to talk about module random just in a few lessons. You will need to know it for your exam as well. So let's see example that we were trying to use before. So let's see the value of a converted. What is it equal? It is equal to 10.99999. Now let's try to round our a converted. So what do you think it's going to be? Now it's obviously going to be 11. But now let's set up the value of a converted to 10.5. Now let's try to round it. Now let's try to figure. So it says round number to a given precision in decimal returns value is and digits is. So let's try 10.6, and 10.6 is already going to give us 11. So let's try to figure out if 10.51 would give us 11. Yes, it does. So it must be larger than 0.5 decimal part to round it up. In case if it's half value, it's going to round it down. There are also a lot of other functions. Let's define values A, B, C, such as 1, 2, 3. Let's try to use some function from A, B, and C. Oh, sorry. B is stored in some data set. Let's say it's stored in tuple. So it would show value 6. Now, have a look. Let's try to find minimum of A, B, and C, which is obviously going to be equal to 1. And maximum of ABC, which is going to be equal to. There is not important thing such as ABS, which is absolute value. Let me remind you, in case if there is such a value as A equal to negative, then absolute value of -5, sorry, not 1, would be equal to. Now, strings. Again, in Python, as we defined before, a strings is called what? It is instance of data type str. This is usually representing text data. There are a few ways how it can be represented using single quotes, double quotes, triple quotes, etc. So there are a few different operations that we can use with strings, which is concatenation, which means adding strings together, repetition by multiplying string by some whole number, and accessing character by index. Python indexing starts from 0. We are going to go through each of these things just in a tiny bit. And there are a few ways how we can format our strings using old format, dot format, or another one such as fstring formatting that was presented in Python 3.0. Now let's have a look how we can create some string. In Python, again, you need to be very careful when you are using some special words. Actually, it's not allowed to use special words. Let me show you an example. We know that sum is what? You can see it's highlighted with orange. It is some function that it returns sum of a few values, etc. In case if you decide to create a variable sum where you would store a plus b plus c, let's print this sum. It would show 0. Let's run it here. 1, 2, 3, and then we see it is equal to 6. And now let's say we want to run sum for values a and b. We want to find sum of a and b. What do you think is going to happen? Error is going to happen because now we redefined our sum. It became integer. And before here, it was a function. So in such cases, you must be 100% careful to make sure you're not redefining anything by accident. So in these cases, it's better to call it total. Here, unfortunately, after we redefine the sum, we can't use it anymore. So in this case, we can just restart our kernel. Let's run our ABC total. And here, let's see. Now it's working correct because now we restarted our Python. So now it forgot that before we defined some integer variable, now sum is I was mentioning all of. So in most of the programming languages such as Java, C, C++, C#, you would see a data type string, but in Python it is str. As you can see, it's even highlighted with special syntax. So make sure you are not using the value of str. You can use whatever you want to. String, you can use line, etc. So let's say we have line hello world and we want to output this. It's going to be showing us a hello world, or in case if you are going to use print function to it, it will just show you hello world without quotation. But let's see why it says single quoted string and double quoted string. What's the difference? In the example, we can see that it is opening with 1 and closing with 1 and opening with 2 and closing with quotational marks. So let's try to open it with double and close with single. And as you can see, ID already shows us syntax error. It explains us that, can it fix it quickly for us? Copilot explains to us that it's probably terminated with matching quotation. So let's say we accept and we are going to, and we can see now it's printed. Now, another question. What do you think would be happening in case if I put single marks inside? Now it's going to print the value in quotational marks. But let's say I want to use single marks, but I want to say that I'm going to visit Fred's birthday, something like this, if I want to apply single quotational mark. So how do I need to fix it? I would need to put backslash. Let's see. It allows me to show the correct date. Now let's even try to put marks here and here. We can see it's working as expected. Also, another important thing, multi-line string. It's not so common, but sometimes it's used. This use 3. This line is split or multiple. Now let's try to print our line. And we can see, but what I would like to pay attention, how many lines are here? You might say it is only 4 lines, but the truth is there would be 4 lines here because there is beginning here and ending right. So this is what you need to know about lines. So now let's talk about string operation. Let's use example. Let's create 2 variables. So let's say we have my first name here. Let's also have my last name, of course. That's definitely my surname. Let's say we create a Copilot already suggested us help. So we can see we are using plus sign and this empty space. Let's try to not use it yet. Full name. Let's see what it would be. So what does it mean? It basically glues them next to each other. So that's why we need to add the space between them to make it look proper. Another interesting thing. What we have here, it is called repetition. Let's create a variable number of apples. Let it be. And let's create text apple. That would just have. Now I can see a, let's say, updated string, which would be apple times, time, number of apples. Let's see. It's not looking as great, almost never looking great, to be honest. There are other ways how we can do repetitions. I'm going to show them later when we are coming to list, but it's looking good. It's still working good, let's say. Now, to make it look tiny bit more beautiful, let's try to add quotational mark. Not quotational mark, I apologize. Let's add comma. So now it's looking a bit better. Another important thing. Now let's use both of them. Let's create format and name. This is an example how we can use it. Formatted name. My name is, let's say, a few versions. We have created variable full name a bit earlier. So let's have a look. Formatted name. It's working as expected. Sometimes it can be really useful when you need to use it in this way. I don't mind because your main string is not going to be overwhelmed. It's quite useful in case if you are using, let's say, some big text. in our cases, I prefer to use f string. Martin, so let's create. My name is, you implement, and now let's try to embed integer value in a formatted line, if it's going to work. So you, let's say, throw it information, and we know that how many apples I have. Information about this is stored in the variable number of apples, and we have value apple. Yeah. Instead of apple, let's say it's going to be apple, and let's add s in there. And very important thing here, we must keep track of writing f before quotational marks. So it should be f before quotational marks. Now let's try to print our fruit information. 5 apple. Sorry, it was supposed to be fruit. So I have 5 apples. Why did I write down s? Because we don't know if it's going to be plural or singular value. So the next part of our lesson, what we are going to talk about, is going to be data types. In Python, they are represented as special word bool, B-O-O-L. They are representing either it's true or false. In, we know, computer science, 1 represents true, 0 represents. So let's have a look at some examples. Truth is going to be equal to, let's try to check the type. We can see it's going to be type perfect. Now let's move and let's see if we are allowed to define a variable true, which is equal to, let's say, 40. If it would allow us to print value. Yes, it does allow us to print the value of variable true. Why? Because it is non-capital true. Now let's have a look at capital true. What's going to happen? We can see we cannot assign it. So in the beginning of this session, let me remind you this part here. We mentioned that there are mutable, immutable objects. So it means you cannot change the value of true. You cannot reassign it. Actually, in Python, there are ways how you can reassign it. In case if you go deeper in Python code, you decide to play around. But in most of the cases, you are not allowed to do it. So true, non-capital true can be changed. Capital true cannot be changed. We know that it represents operators equal, not equal, larger, smaller, etc. Basic mathematical operators. Let's say we defined value number 1, which is equal to number 2, which is equal to 2, and we want to compare them, which would be, yeah, so we can also store it in a variable, and we can print out the variable, which is true. So every time we perform some operation, comparison, we are going to return the value true or false, depending if it's true or false. But have a look here. What we've done, we've compared 5 and 2. What's going to happen if you're going to compare 5 and 2.5? If it's allowed. Yes, it is allowed because both of them are numerical data types. 5 is 2.5 is float, so no problem. You can simply compare them. We will go to string values a bit later. Actually, we can do it even now. So now let's try to add one more number 3. Let's call it 10. Let's rename result to compare 1, 2. And now let's compare 1. Let's say we would say in first is the largest. So what would we do? We would need to compare at the same moment number 1, number 2, number 1, and number 3. Or in other way, we can just replace it with results of compare 1, 2 and compare 1, 3. Getting a bit. We compared 2, 3, 3. So we are comparing 1 to first number to the second number, 5 and 2.5. It must return true. We are comparing 5 to 10, 5 to 10, which must return false. And we know that no, it's not. It will return as false as expected. Perfect. Now, let's have a look at typecasting, how we can convert data types, let's say from integer to Boolean. Let's start with basic values. Value number 1, let it be equal. Let's keep the order 1 and 2. So what's going to happen? I suggest us to convert number 1 and number 2 to Boolean data types. How we just use function. In the middle of the lesson, we were talking about the ability to use one-line swapping values. You can apply functions while you're swapping values. Now let's see what would be the output. Number 1, comma, number 2. We can see it would be true. Number 1 became true. Number 2 became false. Now question 2. What do you think would change if instead of 0, I write 42? I'll give you 5 seconds to think, but what would be the output when first value is 1 and second value is 42? How would 42 be converted to Boolean value? So it's going to be true and true. Why is it going to be true and true? Because Python converts to false only values that are 0. Let's say it is 0, it's going to be false. In case if it's going to be -1, it's going to be true. So every single non-zero value in Python is going to be converted to true. Now, another interesting example. Let's have a look at converting string number, which is going to be 5 int number. And let's try to convert it from string to integer. So let's try to the number. We can see it's going to be 5. Now, yeah, so we can see it is whole number. It is data type string. Let's just double check our types. String number. Make sure it was string. Became integer and value became. In case if you are going to print the value of string number, which is important, let's print int number as well using print. So let's make a change. So we can see this one is integer, and we can see neither of them have quotational mark. In other IDEs, when we are printing string values, you usually would have quotational marks around, and you can even see that when I'm going to show it like this, it would show quotational marks. In case if I'm just going to, let me show you, it would show us and int number. So you can see, I do understand the string number is always in quotational marks. Non-string value is not having, stand without quotation. Another interesting, so now let's copy this example and let's have a look. What's going to happen right down here? 5.5, and I try to convert it to int. So let's keep this part 5.5 now, and as you can see, it throws us an error. Why does it throw us an error? You can see invalid literal with base 10. So when we pass the string value to integer function, it expects us that we are going to give some number with base 10, even though the numbers have different bases like 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. But in most cases, we are working with base 10. So in this case, we cannot convert it to integer because we have decimal number here. So we would need to convert it to float instead of integer. So let's have a look. And now it is working as expected. In case if you want to convert it further to integer, so what we would do, we just would add integer function and the output would be what? We remember it keeps just the whole part. It would be just 5. That's all. Now let's try to convert. Let's call it convert. Let's say A is equal to 5.5. B is equal integer from A, and C is equal to string of B. What do you think would be the what would be the final output would show us the value of A, which is 5.5 initial value. B, we are converting 5.5 into integer, getting rid of decimal part, and then we are converting this integer value to what? String value. So and then we would just have 4 5s by 4, because 5 and 5 here, kind of a joke. 5 as int and 5 as a string value. Now let's make it even more interesting and try Boolean value, the value of C. And let's see what it's just going to be equal to value true. Now let's try to figure out how does conversion between Boolean data types and string works. How does it? So let's say we have some line that has, yeah, it's working well. And when we are converting it to Boolean, we are saying, let's create a variable, line is not empty. And we would check it by converting to the Boolean data type. It says true. Now, this was the first example. Let's convert it to a bit more beautiful output. Print is this is a string empty. It says true. Now, let's get rid of text in this line. Sorry, it is line T, not. So in Python, we remember that we can say what? Our line is empty. We could use a greater not. Now, let's try. Is the line empty? It says true. This line is empty. Yes, it is. Now, so since we figured it out that converting empty line to bool would return as false, and let me show you an example again. False. So what do you think converting of this line to integer value would give us from line? And let's see the output. And it says invalid literal because we cannot give nothing to the integer with base 10. The same thing is going to happen to, so the only way where you can convert it is just bool. You are checking if it's empty or not. We are going to talk a bit more deeper in details when we are talking about if statement. How is it used there? So this was the first part with conversion of the exam of different data types. Now, let's see how we can get the information from the keyboard. There is an example given here. Let's repeat it. So to use it, we need to get the input from keyboard, we need to use special function called int. And there is very important note here. By default, input always returns a string. So str data type. So use the input, let's say, and we would get input. Please enter a number. And let's say tip of your number is, it's way too complicated. Then say triple number, which is going to be int number times 3. Triple of your number, which was user int, is going to be triple number. Let's have a look if it's going to work as expected. So let's say I want to enter number 14. Yeah, here you can see it would ask us to input it on the top. It would say what tripled is 42. Again, so let's see line by line what I've done here. So the first line after the input line, I'm converted it to integer. What's going to happen if I'm not going to convert it, if I'm just going to keep it like this? The output would be what? 14, 14, 14. 14, 14, 14. Why it would be 14, 14, 14? Because addition of our string. Because here, in case if we are not converting it to integer data type, there is no conversion. It's going just to keep the value with the same data type. So that's why it is to make proper data type conversion. Let me quickly show you how we would do it in Google Colab. So it looks a bit different here. It asks you to enter the data straight away. As soon as you enter it, as soon as you can see the output. Basically very similar to the regular Python ID. Now, have a look at some examples. So you notice that I was using this hashtag. It's usually used for single line commenting. When you're writing your exam, I would recommend you, because you're going to have 2 or 3 tasks that will require you to write code. So you can write down comments explaining what you've done there. For example, here, I can say ask user to input data, a number. Then here, convert the inputs. Let's make it capital. I like it more. Then here we are calculating triple of the number. And then here in the end, we are printing the result. Yeah. So this is pretty much how you're using single line. There is also multi-line comment that you can enclose in this triple quotation. Let's apply it here as well. Let's write down in this part, we're going to write simple. I'll ask you input the data and print the result. Pretty much it's going to be detailed comment, but you will be able to see what it's usually between main program and some documentation. We keep the distance 2 lines. Between regular different parts of the code, it's just 1 line. Another important thing, white spaces. You can see that I always keep 1 symbol distance, 1 space between variable assignment and the value assigned. You can follow the PIP8 style guide for better Python code. So I also recommend you to use operators. What is it? Let's say we have the value of variable x is equal, and then we can say x plus equal 1. So what does it mean? You can write down this line plus 1. So line 3 and 4, they're going to be equal and have the same output. Let's just double check print. Another trick, you can use f string the next way. You can, inside of these curly brackets, you cannot just put the name of the variable. You can also add equal sign. And let's see what it's going to show us. It's going to show the name of the variable and the value stored in the variable. It's very good for debugging simple cases. Now let's try to replace it back with simple case, which is working the same way as before. So let's assume that you have some code where you need to do it a few times. It's going to be more beautiful to write it down this way. Again, for such cases, we would use loops, which are a bit more complicated constructions that we are going to talk about in 2 lessons. But don't hesitate to use compound. What's more important, it's not just working for what? For adding numbers together. You can say, so what do you think? Let's say equal by 2. So now the value would be equal to what? It's arithmetic progression applied twice, which is equal to 5. Another interesting example, let's say we have number which is equal to 1, 2, 3. I want to apply integer division by 10. So what do you think would be stored in the value number? Just 1. So now let's have a look at the first exercise, the sum of its digits. Perfect. One of my favorites. Problems. Let's start with what? We need to enter number and we are going to convert it to integer straight away. We are going to convert it to integer. We know that this will return us string value, and by converting it to integer, we will have a number value. So let's say digit, how we would calculate the first digit is going to be calculated which way? Let me actually write down an example. Let's say we have 1, 2, 3. So the first number is going to be just 1. So I need to apply integer division by 100. Where is our number? Is here by 100. Now to extract second digit, which is going to be 2. Let's start with third one. It would be quite simple. I just need to extract result of division by 10. Okay, now most interesting case is how to extract the second digit, which is 2. There are a few approaches how we can do it. For example, in case if we know that it's going to be 3-digit number, we can just get the result of remainder division by 100. So it's going to give us what? 23. And then we would just need to apply floor division by 10, which would return us just 2. Now let's check if you've got all of this correct. Let's say 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, everything is correct. Now we say total. Again, if you remember, we are not using some variable. Let's print total as well, which should return us 6. We can see it returns us 6 as well. So this is one of the examples, how you can use it, how you can convert it. Now let's one more example to numbers and print the larger number. So now we know quite a few tricks how we can do it. There are 2 approaches that we can apply to solving this problem. So let's have a look at the first one. So the first approach, obviously, let's say something simple. Number 1 is going to be of input and number, the first number and the second. And now we are going to apply the trick that we already learned before with converting results to Boolean. So let's say we are trying to check if number 1 is greater. So we would store it in this value. Into another value, in another variable, I apologize, we would store the comparison if number 2 is larger or equal to number. Now, let's check result. We know that number 1 is going to be either true or false. Let's write comment or false. And same here. It's going to be true. So when we convert, let's first number. Let's just use first. And it's going to be integer from number 1 is great. And as you can figure, second. So why did I convert it to integer? So now I know that one of them is going to be true and another one is going to be false. Why is it going to be that way? Because they have contradiction in its condition. So it's going to be just 1 or 0, and this one is going to be 1 and 0 or 0. So now I can multiply first number by number 1, and I will add multiplication of the variable second, which is going to be either 1 or 0, and multiplication of number 2. So let's see what's going to be the output. I will enter 5, I will enter 8. The output is, this is one of the ways how we can. Now, let's have a look at another solution, how we could approach it using mathematical approach. So we know to figure out, let's write down using branches. So we have to, now we can apply the next number 1 plus number 2. Then we are going to add difference of these 2 numbers, but we must get it as absolute value. So in case if the first number, okay, I can see mistake. In case if this is going, the second number is going to be larger than the second one, let's assume 5 and 8. So the output here would be equal to what? -3. Absolute value from -3 is equal to 3. Then we know that the missing value between first number and second number is 3. We're just going to have double second number in numerator. So as a result, let's check 5 and 8. Oof, sorry. Output got about output is going to be. Now, these are just 2 exercises. So for homework, you are going to have another exercise. Now, as I mentioned before, we are going to have some very interesting giveaway. What does this giveaway mean? Let me quickly have a look at all of the conditions of the giveaway. It's going to be very exciting for you. Maybe not as exciting. I'm sorry, I don't want to raise your expectations too high, but I think that your work must be paid off back in some certain way. So what we are going to do? So I will find a way how to give away 50, 30 or 10 pounds certificates on Amazon. So just for this, you will need to follow simple requirements. You need to subscribe and like all of the videos on YouTube channel. You need to leave comments under each video starting from this one. Refer 3 friends. Yeah. So this is a way how you could invite your friends. You would just leave comment. Again, I will leave the details how you can leave it. Python or your dev and your name. So again, when your friends come, we know who they came from. We would follow Telegram and Discord for updates, and there will be a Python tasks provided in Google Colab, probably with auto testing. So you would be uploading the link to it to Google quizzes that are going to be part of each week sessions as well. So we are going to Python quizzes on Google Forms and Google Colab. This is your chance to win some little money that will pay you back for joining these sessions, for working on Python skills, etc. And you can bring your friends and you all can dive deeper into the knowledge of Python. Again, it's fully voluntary for you. So it's your choice to participate or to not, but feel free to share it with your friends so you can get some extra cash which you can invest into, I don't know, for example, buy a new Call of Duty or Stalker 2 game. I was happy to have you today for this session. We were talking about some basics in Python programming language. We've covered it in data type, we've covered float, we've covered strings, we've covered Booleans. We have written some simple code how to enter the data from keyboard. We figured out how to find the specific digits in the number, and make sure that you are liking this video and following the channel, and the description for giveaway will be in the description of the video. See you next weekend. Bye bye. Take care, boys.